Hello everyone, I hope you guys are doing well. So, today again, we are going to look at five more words. Now, these English words that I have included in today's lesson are not so complicated, but these are the words which you can genuinely use in your everyday life. Okay, so the lesson has been prepared by me, Svetlana Mandal. Now, let's start with the lesson. The first word that I have included in today's lesson is deleterious. Now, this one basically means harmful, destructive, or even it means, detrimental. Let's look at the example first. The effects of morphine are much more deleterious than those of opium smoking. Now, I could have just said the effects of morphine are much more dangerous than those of opium smoking, but I have used this word deleterious. So it's you can just say that, it's a good way of putting it. It's a more fancy way of putting it. This is how I always keep on saying this, that this is how people, there are few people, when they speak in English, you are like amazed and you're like awed, because they just use these fancy words, and that is what makes their English more refined. So in order to make your English more crisp and refined, you have to use these words. So that was the first word that we had in today's lesson. The second word is demagogue. Now, a demagogue is basically a leader, okay? So, usually appealing to emotions or prejudice. For example, the new demagogue representative of this team is doing an excellent job. So, the demagogue of this, the demagogue representative of this team is basically the leader who, whenever he talks or the way he deals with people, he has this tendency of appealing to their emotions. Okay, so that is what makes this particular representative a demagogue. The next word is digression. Now, digression is a word that you can actually use in your everyday life in so many ways. Now, let's first look at the example. So, digression basically refers to the act of turning aside, straying from the main point, especially in some speech or argument. So, for example, say I'm talking about a cat, okay, that how I plan on, petting a cat right now, and then suddenly I'm talking about cats, right? So suddenly I start talking about how I have to go to the market. So this part, like, and then I come back again talking about cats. So this part where I was talking about going to the market, this is basically my digression. I just digressed from whatever I was talking about. I was talking about cat. There's no relation between this particular thing that I'm talking about and market. I just digressed and I gave you some extra information, and that is my digression. Okay, so that is the act of deviating from what I'm talking about right now is called digression. Let's look at the example, then it'll be clearer. The professor delivered the lecture with many digressions in between to make it more interesting. So, you will see that often professors and teachers, when they give a lecture, when they deliver a lecture, they often actually digress from the main point in order to add in more information, or, they crack jokes in order to make the class environment a bit more lighter, like, so that so that the students, they can comprehend it easily, and it's not very boring. Like, if you keep on talking about something very serious, then it tends to get boring, right? And then the students will be like distracted, like, I don't even get what the professor is talking about. So often professors are seen doing this. They digress from the main point, and then they talk about something else, and then come back to the main point that they were talking about. So this particular thing is called digression. The next word that we have is empathy. Now, the reason why I have actually included this word is very important, because the word that is going to be after this, like the last word in today's lesson, is sympathy. So often people tend to confuse empathy and sympathy. That is the only reason why I've included these two words in this lesson. So let's first see what empathy actually means. So empathy basically refers to, the identification with the feelings of others. So it's basically like, if I have failed in chemistry, then I empathize with someone who has failed in chemistry. Okay, I it's or maybe so that is empathy. Like I am connecting to this particular person who has, just like me, has got like a back in chemistry. Okay, so I can connect to her. I feel like my feelings are in identification with her feelings. Okay, so that is what empathy is. I'm empathizing with her. For example, let's look at the example. Being an orphan herself, she had empathy for such kids in the locality. So she knew what it is to be an orphan, and that is the reason why she empathizes with other orphans that is there, the who are there in her locality. Okay, so she doesn't have sympathy because she is not what sympathy is actually like. For example, if I am a very good like student in chemistry, and I have like scored say 90% in chemistry, then I can have sympathy for someone who has got like say 30% in chemistry. Okay, in that case, that is sympathy, because I am at a position where I can feel sympathy for this particular person who is way below my standard or my academic ranks. Okay, so that is when sympathy comes. But in case of empathy, I have to like empathize, I have to identify myself with this particular person in order to empathize with her. Like in this case, this girl, she herself is like is an orphan. Okay, so that is why she understands what is the pain of being an orphan, and that is why she identifies with the other orphans that are there in her locality. So the next word, like I said, is sympathy. Now, sympathy basically refers to the feeling of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. You see, it's someone else's misfortune. In this case, in case of sympathy, you are not the unfortunate one. You are a privileged person who is feeling sympathy or who is feeling pity or sorrow about for someone who is underprivileged. Okay, so that is sympathy. Let's look at the example. She has great sympathy for her friends who couldn't make it to the final round. See, so this basically means that she has definitely made it to the final round. Now she's just feeling bad. She's feeling bad, and she's feeling pity for her friends who couldn't qualify for the final round. So that is what sympathy is. I hope you have understood the difference between sympathy and empathy. It's not like a very hard thing to understand. There are so many people who actually know, and then they use these two words very liberally, but there are people who find it hard to differentiate between these two. So it's definitely for those people. And that's it for today's lesson. And please take care of yourself, and thank you for staying with me till the end.